Folks, we're in for a really special treat this morning. I'm incredibly excited to introduce you to Chris Williams, if you don't already know him. Chris is the CEO of System6, a tech-enabled remote accounting and finance firm serving over 300 small and medium-sized businesses. Before acquiring System6 in 2021 through Search, Chris worked in private equity at TPG, one of the world's largest private equity firms, where he did real estate acquisitions. He earned his MBA from Stanford GSB, where he was introduced to the ETA model. And rather than raising a traditional search fund, which many GSB folks do, Chris self-funded his 10-month search while still working with investors from day one, and used an SBA loan to acquire System6, retaining over 70% equity in the deal. Since acquisition, Chris has more than tripled revenue by vertically specializing in serving acquisition entrepreneurs like himself, and expanding deeper into controllership and tax services. He's grown System6 into a fully remote operation in over 25 states, 3 countries. And in 2025, they were in the Inc. 5000 list. So truly impressive. Yes. Chris is super active in the ETA community. If you go to other events, I'm sure you see him around. He speaks at a lot of them. My personal favorite thing about Chris, he signs off every email with "keep building." I love that. Chris is also a returning SMBash speaker this year, so welcome back to the SMBash stage.
I actually I just realized I meant to wear them, found my SMBash socks from, I think, 2022. Some people might remember those back in the day. I see some OGs over there. I literally do have them in my suitcase. Should have worn them today. But yeah, excited to be back.
Yeah. When I lay it all out like that, how does it make you feel?
It's crazy. I mean, time flies this stage in life. I had a daughter a year and a half ago, and last year was coming here was the first time I had traveled, and I can't believe that was a year ago. That feels like 20 years ago. But buying a small business, the roller coaster that it is, it is incredibly energizing, incredibly fun, and yeah, time flies. It's also incredibly hard. We'll talk about that, and stressful. It's absolutely a roller coaster. But you will not ever in this ecosystem kind of feel bored. I can promise you that.
Yeah. I've actually never told Chris this before. I don't believe I've ever told you this before, but you did an episode of Acquiring Minds back in 2021, 22, right after you had acquired System6. Yeah. I remember listening to it at the time. I was a little bit newer to ETA, and we're kind of getting into the community and the model. I was actually working for also real estate private equity, a large one. And I had previously worked with SMB accounting firms. So it was like, wow, this guy has put himself in an incredible position. What an opportunity he has. Now, over the past couple of years, it's been great to get to know you and sitting down and doing this conversation. So a little bit of a full circle moment for me here. So I appreciate you doing this. And I think that's just indicative of how welcoming and warm this community is. Even if we're competing for deals and service providers competing for work and whatnot, it's really a place.
On that, there's other accounting firm owners in the room. Patrick from Appletree, he's personally helped me a lot of ways. It is, the reality is there's a ton of small businesses out there, and so it does really feel like there's room for everybody. And I've been in other, business communities, right, private equity, et cetera. This feels much more kind of friendly and cooperative and collaborative, and especially when you're stepping into something that's new. I'd never run a business before. Still, I'm just learning a lot of things. It's important to be in an ecosystem where people will help you. So credit to you guys for playing a part in that.
Well, credit to you for being here. I appreciate it. All right, how I want to do this, we're going to do some Q&A at the end. I do have a lot of things I want to get through to Chris, and I want to start way back, kind of going through your path to acquisition, kind of pre-operation and the acquisition phase. So take us back to when you're in PE, you're doing deals. What put this crazy idea in your head that, hey, I want to go buy a small business?
So I didn't, buying a small business was I think not as well known as it is now. So that was kind of the second step. The first thing was, I worked in investing, and I spent the last couple of months before I went to business school, I spent 3 to 4 months every other week at a company we had bought in Denver. And I was just in it. I was they had never done financial reporting before for kind of investors. So I spent a lot of my time helping stand up kind of that monthly cadence, et cetera, and just realized I liked being closer to the action. I looked at my bosses who I enjoyed working with. I'm not someone who was God, PE was a miserable experience, but I felt hey, as you get more senior in your investing career, you kind of get pulled away from the day-to-day and from sort of really producing the results. You're sitting on boards, you're doing thematic stuff. And I just, after spending a few months really working inside of a 100-person company, I really enjoyed how quickly, you could feel like you got stuff done. And so when I went to business school, I was going to explore that. I was like, okay, what are my paths to, obviously, I could go start something. What are my paths to, becoming more of a closer to the action driver of results operator? And then discovered search, at Stanford. It's a big part of kind of the ecosystem there, and kind of spent my whole 2 years there exploring the entire ecosystem. There's traditional, there's a bunch of other motions, but I fell in love with it pretty quickly. And just in terms of one really useful piece of career advice I got, like going into grad school and just coming to things like this too, is just pay attention to what energizes you.
Yeah.
Like even here, there's a bunch of different flavors of buying a small business, and that was what really ultimately attracted me to it when I was in school. I was like, man, I just get fired up listening to people talk about their stories, their highs and the lows.
Yeah.
And that's like kind of ultimately why I decided to go do it, as I recognized that it kind of kicked me up, and go chase something that energizes you.
Yeah, I love that. So you said you were at Stanford. You're kind of exploring, obviously Stanford, traditional business school, kind of one of the two, very institutional players in the traditional search world. Kind of tell me your thought process in eventually going self-funding instead of doing a traditional search one.
Yeah, and look, I'm not here to knock and say traditional search is like a terrible idea. I have a lot of friends that have done it, have been super successful. I think there are like pros to it. Like everything in life has pros and cons, and you should be aware of all of them. For me, it was two main things. One, it felt like, you can definitely knock traditional search for like maybe a little bit of a lack of creativity in terms of like, you go on the website of 10 traditional searchers, their websites all look the same. They have many of the same investors, some of whom ultimately invested in my business, some of whom like we work with because we serve their portfolio companies. So it's not a huge knock, but it did feel like a lot of people are kind of doing the same thing, and that was sort of red flag, yellow flag one for me. And then second, very much true, when you do a traditional search, you narrow what you can go buy. You have investors that have a more defined box of what they want to invest in, and then also, for the math to kind of work for you, like we all have financial ambitions with this path, you need to buy a bigger business. And that's getting harder and harder as more private equity comes down into the lower market. And then I also had some geographic constraints. Like my wife is in grad school, we're very much Northern California kind of life. We have siblings, we have parents around, so I kind of knew I wasn't going to move across the country. And so self-funding allowed me to look at smaller businesses, give me more opportunities to find something, allowed me to focus more geographically when maybe that's not what some traditional investors will want you to do. So at the end of the day, it kind of really came down to you get more optionality. There's danger in that. I definitely spent some time when I was searching, chasing shiny objects I never should have looked at. In a traditional search, investors won't let you spend time on that. So I think if you can self-fund, you give yourself more options, that's the way to go, but make sure you don't use that to look at stuff you should never touch and waste your time.
Don't waste your time.
Time's the most important thing you have, especially in self-funded search, because it's a ticking time bomb.
Yeah, and so it was more of kind of like a personal, given your kind of constraints and whatnot, it's just a better fit for you. I think that's really important, because a lot of folks that kind of contemplate that, and even different models of ETA, right? You think about what's good for you, not just kind of like what's good for like the search itself or the process, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's 5, 6 like proven models where you can go find case studies of people that have absolutely crushed it and people that have failed. And so you have to figure out what resonates with you. The last quick thing I'll say is, because I know there's a lot of self-funded here, I think it's great to self-fund, but don't be afraid to buy a bigger business if you find it, even if that means you're going to own less. Like ultimately, that's not what I did. I did the SBA. I own a lot of it. Like I think that's an awesome path. But if you find $2.5 million of earnings that you can only own 30, 40% of, like 25%, that is, at least think about it. There are benefits to buying a bigger business if you find it.
Well, so let's hold on that. So you, obviously SBA, as you said, you retained over 70% equity in a deal. In hindsight, a number of years later, How important was that?
Yeah, I think it creates. I mean, look, it creates some safety for you after you get past the fact that you like have a massive loan that's personally guaranteed. So yeah, doing a self-funded deal using an SBA is personally riskier than a traditional search or other stuff because you're taking out a personally guaranteed SBA loan. Like I have a lien on our house. If things go bad, like there's real risk there. But once you get past that, like if you're able to not have those challenges, yeah, owning more of your business takes a little bit of the pressure off in terms of, man, I need to grow it so much to be able to have kind of the equity that I want to create. Like, yeah, in traditional search, you own less. Therefore, there's more pressure to grow to create the equity value you want for yourself. And self-funded search, when you own more of it, there's that. And then, yeah, you have more control. And, that's nice.
One thing you did, though, in your self-funded search that I'd say maybe kind of what the searchers we see like half and half do,
Yeah.
half don't, is you were still very active with investors from day one,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
What was your strategy behind that?
Yeah, I mean, so I had 2 investors that I'd met in school, and I was basically talking to once a month. I'd send them kind of a summary of what I was looking at, what I'd worked on. I mean, the strategy was like, I was a 28-year-old kid who didn't really know what he was doing. Why would I not want to like have professional people who have seen hundreds of small businesses around me? And so, yeah, it was really just about like trying to protect myself from making a bad decision. And I felt like, yeah, like guiding me during my search. I mean, obviously you get a deal under LOI, there's a ton of investors you can go get to, but I also wanted to make sure I was looking at good industries, I was sourcing effectively, and, having a relationship with a couple investors along the way, I think helped me during my search.
Yeah, I like that industry. We're gonna get
Yeah,
back to
yeah,
that
yeah.
later because I do want to talk about that. But you did something that a lot of self-funded searchers maybe want to do and probably shouldn't do, which was you sourced
Yeah.
proprietary.
Yeah. So I mean that came from 2 things. So one, like in traditional search, most people are doing direct outreach to find the business they buy. That's kind of the ecosystem that I knew. Like I didn't know as much about this ecosystem as I do now, certainly. So all my friends that were searching, like my search cohort for the most part, like I was on a monthly Zoom call, people were doing outreach. So I was doing that. I did spend about 20% of my time looking at deals through the broker channel. I didn't have relationships with like awesome brokers. Jackie's in the house. There's others here like that. I think brokers for me were a great way to like learn different industries, get exposure. But I think especially in professional services where I ended up buying, like trust is the second most important thing in the business you're going to buy. Trust with the seller, like buy from a good person. And, when you do a direct deal, you just have more time to build that trust. Like I spent a ton of time with my seller before we even signed an LOI. Definitely riskier because like doing direct outreach to find a deal is just lower volume. Like I bought System 6 after 10 or 11 months, but like if I hadn't bought System 6, I was back to absolutely zero. Like the pipeline dries up really quickly when you're doing direct outreach and you get under a deal. So I think it's a great way to do things, but it is probably riskier. It decreases your chance of getting a deal done just because less volume.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned industry again, so I do want to go there, and I want to get this quote right because you've said before that you can change everything about a business, but you can't change the industry that it's in. I love that. How did that kind of guide the search phase?
Yeah, I'd say industry and also like who you buy the business from to the previous point. But yeah, I mean, I think that like, first of all, most of us in this room have never bought and run a business before, so you're probably going to come in and like not be the world's best owner, CEO. And so, it's given that dynamic and you're buying a small business, which, is exposed more so than a medium or big business to kind of like the waves of the industry, so to speak. It's just like incredibly beneficial to be in a industry that's growing, that has, momentum behind it, where there's opportunity. Like, I think there's, we've all heard, hey, you want to have recurring revenue, you don't want to have a ton of customer concentration. Like there's those things too. But I mean, for me, it was ultimately like, hey, I want to buy a business where I think it's going to be, not incredibly hard to grow it, like where I see a lot of growth already happening, because at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do, buy a business and grow it. And so I focused a lot of my search on growing industries, like not rocket science, not super insightful, but look, when I was searching, listening to podcasts, it felt like investors' content was like dogmatic about you have to buy in a good industry, you have to have recurring revenue, you have to have like low capex, like all that. In hindsight, is kind of true. You can't have everything, but I think being in a good industry, like investors pound their table about that, and I think they're right.
Well, you have that.
Yeah, I mean,
all of those.
Like,
so it kind of worked out, huh?
I mean, there's accounting's not perfect, but yeah, I mean, like I said, you cannot change the industry that you're in. You can maybe make tweaks to your business model, but if you buy in a hard industry, we could come up with industries that had a hard time over the last 4 or 5 years, like. That makes your life a lot harder.
The only thing I'd say to that is, how do you, obviously those are more attractive industries. Those are known attractive industries where multiples aren't as attractive.
Yeah.
How do you reconcile that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two paths in search and buying a small business. I think you can play the like, hey, I want to buy a business with a low multiple. I can own more of the business, and you just know you're signing up for probably more of a knife fight. Mm-hmm. And that may be what you want. Like for me, it was, I wanted to feel like I could grow something significantly, build a team. I wanted my career to feel like it was going to evolve as the business grew. And so, yeah, I paid like north of 5 times for System 6, 5 times earnings. Different interest rate environment, harder to do that now, but like, I absolutely paid more. I own, 70%, not 85, 90%. Like, I paid more to be in a growing industry, and I would do that trade all day long.
Nice. Yeah, I like that.
And also like, I didn't use max leverage, so I own a little bit less because of that, and I think that's worth it too.
Well, correct me if I have this wrong, you passed on System 6 the first time you saw it.
Yeah. Probably could have paid a little less if I'd bought it the first time I saw it. So there were 2 things at the time that I looked at it that were a little bit of a turnoff. One was like, it was small, it was a $2.5 million revenue business, 18 people. I was 3 months into search, I still thought I was going to find perfect. You're not going to find perfect, so you have to define what you're willing to deal with. And in hindsight, I got more comfortable with buying small. And then also like System 6, you see this in bookkeeping. Once you add tax, this goes away. But like bookkeeping businesses have churn. There was customer turnover in System 6. We still have that. Companies get bought. Companies close. Sometimes we mess up. So I was looking for, you got to have 95% customer retention. Like the box that investors say. And then after looking at more deals for a few months, I realized it was actually pretty good. And then the other lesson is I stayed in touch. It wasn't like I just stopped. I felt the connection with the seller, Jeremy, so we had stayed in touch. We traded a few emails kind of in between, and that kept it warm.
Yeah, I like that. I want to transition now. Yeah. You've acquired the business. Now you got to go run it.
Yeah.
This was your dream, right? You weren't. Even though you worked
it's everything you imagine.
But you weren't, like you said earlier, right? Some people want to do deals and they pursue search. They're more attracted to the deal, and then they realize they got to operate, right? But it sounds like it was different, right? You wanted to operate. You wanted to be, in an organization that was more free flowing and able to impact change and direction. So now you've acquired System 6. Now what? Give me kind of the first 90 days, first year, really. Was it all you expected it to be? What did it feel like? What did it look like?
So a couple of things. One, and this back to the benefit of doing like direct outreach a little bit. Everybody in the company knew the deal was happening. I had actually met a lot of the people in the company, like the leaders, a couple months before the deal closed.
Wow.
So I was lucky. We've done 2 acquisitions since then, and one of them was a different experience. But in System 6, I was lucky where there wasn't kind of like the shock and awe of like, hey, I just sold the business. Here's the new guy. Mm-hmm. So, I didn't have that experience, but I still did have like a lot of surprises and things in the first year. I think one, even with trust and all this stuff with the seller, we've done 3 acquisitions. Every single time, the seller's doing more than I thought they were pre-acquisition. Whether I wouldn't call that misrepresentation by the seller. I just think it's like
They don't even realize it half the time.
Exactly,
Yeah.
100%, and just or the things they're doing in half an hour take me much longer to make a decision. So I think plan for that. I think we like. I don't know if you can really prepare for it, but like 2 months in was the first time we had someone who I was like put in their notice, and I was like, oh my God, this is going to break the business. Like I was like so scared, sleepless nights. And then you pretty quickly learn that like these things are hopefully a little bit more resilient than your gut feels. So the first time you get punched, don't brush it away, but also recognize that you're probably reacting more severely than it is in reality. And then I would say like, try and deliver when people are skeptical of you. And there were people internally who like, don't take it personally. Like I definitely got some shade from a couple folks internally out of the gate. And I think the most important thing you can do is, everybody says don't make changes early in the business. I agree with that. Don't make significant changes, or don't like make a change that somebody asks for just to make a change because you're trying to make them happy. But like, go find things really quickly that you can do that you've spent enough time to realize is going to improve the business, and try to get those wins on the board. For me, it was like I went out and started talking to clients really fast and started selling really fast. Like and the fact that I was able to bring in new customers pretty quickly, I think created some momentum and trust with the team.
Yeah, but some people will be unhappy, and
Yeah.
at any phase, not just right
Yeah.
after an acquisition, right? Obviously, there's a lot of emotions and stuff going on in that time period, but operating generally, sometimes you have to make the decision to move on from certain people. Unfortunately, it's something we all experience, and sometimes people make the decision to move on from you. And tell me, I know that's something kind of we've both dealt with quite a bit recently. Like, how do you kind of manage that while managing culture and keeping people on point and operations and all that kind of stuff without taking it personally too? Because it's not personal.
Yeah, I think that I've definitely like learned the lesson. Christian, who's my coach, is in the room, would call me out on this of like, yeah, you do need to be willing to move on from people once they've kind of shown you the signs like quickly, and that can be uncomfortable, but you can move on from people, terminate them, to be direct, and like they may not agree with it, they may feel like it's really, really unfair, but there are things you can do that you can like look yourself in the mirror and be like, yeah, hey, we're going through this literally right now, talking about with some people here last night, like extending healthcare severance for a couple extra months. Like there are ways to fire people and also do it in a way that you can feel better about it, and also, although how you feel is not really, that important, but also like how, I had HRs involved, and I want, her to see how we treat people, and like understand you can terminate people, but do it in a humane way. Yeah. And then I think, it's just like, we have turned over more than half of our team as we've grown. Some of it's been people don't want to do what the new business is doing, and it's just, you kind of have to learn. It's just natural. Yeah. It's treat your people the right way, but what the business needs is ultimately most important. And so if what someone wants isn't aligned with that, it's not a fit.
Yeah. One of the things regarding kind of like team and culture and how you guys operate that I think, you and I share, and also some searchers in the room might be kind of thinking about, is System 6 was fully remote when you acquired them, right? So you're stepping into a fully remote business. There's challenges and there's opportunities with that. Yeah. Talk about that a little bit and how that kind of shaped your early days of operating.
I think first and foremost, like if you run a remote business, you can't try and treat it like it's an in-person, like we do a monthly all hands on Zoom, but like we don't do a ton of like forced awkward Zoom happy hours and stuff like that. Like a lot of our team wants to work in a remote business. A lot of our team works less than 40 hours, 30 to 35 hours, so they can go pick up their kid from, practice in the afternoon or whatever. So like, yeah, kind of respect, like we try to respect what remote work is. We don't really force certain hours on folks. And so I think recognize that like remote culture is different than in person. You do need to track it. Like we have metrics, we have weekly metrics that we look at across every level of the team. And so, yeah, there have been at times people that have been sort of abusing the remote component and not working as much as they should be. And like we are able to catch that, inside of a couple weeks because we have productivity things we're tracking, like not screen button clicking, but like how much revenue should you be managing for your position? And so there is a little bit of, I think, extra like system oversight you probably need to build in. But
yeah, you can't just walk around the office and see that everybody's working, right?
And it's also meant like we do a ton of surveys internally. Like everybody talks about it, customer happiness, customer NPS. Like, yeah, we can't tell because you can't see someone like when they're, in the office, you can tell someone's frustrated about something. It's harder to pick that up remotely.
Yeah.
So we are asking for a ton of feedback in a ton of different ways so that hopefully we can bubble stuff up before somebody just like puts in their notice. So, sometimes people get annoyed by how many surveys we send, but I think it's pretty important.
Yeah. So specifically, another thing, it's kind of unique to acquisition entrepreneurship, right? And even though you were in private equity and whatnot, and it's kind of tangential to accounting, right? Like finance and accounting, right? But you weren't an accountant.
Yeah,
You're not an accountant.
Still not. Yeah.
Yeah. How did that work? How did you familiarize yourself with the accounting work? And tell me a little bit more about that, as a lot of searchers kind of go through that.
I mean, I do think that like if you can try and buy a business in something where you have some tangential experience, like I was not an accountant, but I spent a lot of time in Excel and profit and loss statements, et cetera. So like there's maybe my learning curve was a little less steep. I think also like candidly, if you have to buy a business where you feel like you are going to be in delivery a lot as the owner and it's something you know nothing about, like you might want to ask yourself, is that the right business to buy? Like, if I was going to have to be like literally doing accounting 40 hours, out of the week, out of the gate, that might not, that says some things about the business, how scaled is it, but also it's like, you might screw some stuff up. You might really lose some trust if you come in and you're doing something you know nothing about. So a couple of things on when you pre-buy, but then, once you get in the business, I mean, you hear people talk about it in home services, like go ride in the truck. Like you can do the same thing in our business. So, I went through like a customer onboarding with a new client and like, spent time like literally Zoom shadowing people on how they're doing different parts of the job. And then going to talk to customers, like, understanding what do they value about you, and like that's super important. So there are ways to get out from behind your desk, even if it's kind of a remote business.
Was the seller an accont? Was that kind of how he built it?
No, he was an entrepreneur who started the business as well. I mean, so I think he was, he'd done some bookkeeping out of the gate, but similar, like, there are reasons you want to look for businesses that have certain components, like an owner who's not in day-to-day delivery. It definitely makes it easier to step into.
Yeah. How do you build that trust though, as you're kind of shadowing people and you're talking to them, internally, right? A new guy coming in, he doesn't know what we do. Like he doesn't know debits and credits, even if you do. Right?
Yeah. No, I think like super transparent. Like I told people, out of the gate, like, hey, look, I'm not an accountant. I'm not here to like tell you exactly how to do your job. Like I'm not here to tell you how to use QuickBooks better. Like I'd love to just shadow you on this project for a little bit so I can better understand like how you spend your time and maybe I can find some ways to like improve your experience. Like, I view a lot of our job, our number one mission, honestly, is like, we're trying to make this a better work environment, professional services. Our people are really the product. So like, how can we serve them better? And so, I was telling people, look, I'm not trying to tell you how to do QuickBooks, but let me just see what you're doing so I can learn more. That can help me better improve our business, which will help you have a better work experience.
Was there ever particularly kind of when you were going through that process in the first year or whatever, where you're like, what did I get myself into?
I mean, I would say yes. Like that happens a lot. One thing that sticks out was like, modern remote accounting firm. That's what I thought I bought. Like we were still, sending out proposals in Microsoft Word, converting to PDFs, getting like clients to then securely type in their bank information onto this PDF, send it back through like a secured file share. I did a couple of those out of the gate in sales and was like, okay, we got to make the changes there. The other thing that was scarier for me out of the gate, like what did I get myself into when this first kind of person quit? I realized that we had much more kind of like one client to one person than I thought. Like the seller had talked about, hey, we have team-based service model. And we sort of had that, but we had a lot of one-to-one. And so you lose a team member, in theory, hopefully they've documented stuff, but not everybody always does. And so, that creates customer risk really quickly in a professional services business. So we pretty quickly, and we'll get into like cut margin story, but now all of our clients have like 2 to 3 people working on them at different levels, even if they're super small, so that there's a little bit more like redundancy protection and kind of knowledge share internally. And that does mean margins are lower, but it also means like when I'm less scared about team transition than I was in that first year.
Yeah. One thing I'm interested in, how do you guys kind of grapple with AI and technology and stuff as that continues to evolve?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like it's something I'm worried about, if I'm like being 100% honest. It's moving incredibly quickly. Like, I diligenced AI risk when I bought System 6, and it was like, I talked to guys who are on board members of big companies doing bookkeeping AI, like Pilot and stuff, and it was like, not a huge risk. And then, obviously, like ChatGPT and now Claude have really changed things over the last couple of years, particularly the last like 6 to 9 months. I think that it's a huge opportunity for us in the short to medium term. Like we are starting to use things internally. We're actually going to be hiring soon. If anybody knows someone who wants to kind of be a professional AI builder inside of a professional services business, we're going to launch that position soon. But I feel like there's a ton of opportunity for us to make our, we do stuff with Zapier and low code things today. We have a lot of opportunity to streamline things for the next couple of years. But like 5 years from now, accounting's not going to go away. Like small business owners are always going to want to talk to someone, not a robot. But, like 60, 70, 80% of our work, 50% of our work might be able to be done by technology. And like, that's going to mean change inside of our business. What does that do to the pricing? What does that do to the exit multiples? Like, obviously accounting has more risk than home services does or something. So I'm very excited about what we can do in the next couple of years to become more efficient, make our day-to-day better for our team members. But like, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't, apprehensive about what might happen 5 years from now. But like, I can't control that problem today. Like, let's just focus on what we can be doing now.
5 years ago, right? You weren't concerned at all. 5 years from now, who knows what it'll look like, right?
But it's like, it does, I feel more pressure now than I did like 9 months ago to like build faster. Let's get to scale faster. Because like when I bought System 6, I thought I was going to own System 6 for 20 years. I would love to continue growing for 20 years, but like, I got to be realistic with like what professional services might happen.
Well, despite kind of troubles in the normal operating and ownership and stuff, I know you're not like willing to raise the glove, but you're winning, right? You're delivering some blows here. You've tripled revenue since acquiring. What are kind of the biggest levers you've had for growth?
Yeah, I mean, look, when you're in it, I appreciate you saying that. Like when you're in it, you're always just focused on like what can be better, and there's an endless list of things that can be better. And we've grown revenue or not. Like I'm very open. We have not grown profitability a ton because we've spent to grow revenue, and certainly some of it's like there's things I could do better to scale profit. But back to the revenue growth story. I mean, one, like finding a market where your services resonate, and then flood that market. Like if you want to grow, get aggressive in how you attack a market. So it wasn't, I kind of clicked after I bought System 6, but I realized like, hey, a lot of folks who are buying small businesses are going to need help with accounting post-close. often the owner's spouse is doing the accounting, or maybe it's their local CPA, or it's a local bookkeeper, you know, or they're going to go away with the transaction, or it's like the new buyer has higher expectations in terms of speed. They need better financial reporting. So there's like obviously a need more often than not for better accounting in kind of these rooms. And then so I was just like, I went and still go to a ton of conferences, advertise on a podcast, like, figure out your niche and then throw a lot of resources at it.
Yeah. So it's more aggressive kind of marketing in the way you guys do,
as
like, opposed to.
You meet a lot of business owners who are proud of the fact that they don't have sales and marketing spend. Oh, I grew 10% last year and I didn't spend $1 on marketing.
Yeah.
Like, well, what if you spent $100,000 on marketing? Could you grow more?
Right.
And you got to be willing to cut margin, not over lever so that you have the ability to do that. But that's really been, kind of we've grown a lot organically, and it's primarily been through just trying to get our name out there as much as possible.
But you've also added services, which I think is incredibly important for a bookkeeping business, right? Because you acquired a bookkeeping business and kind of expanded out from there. So tell us the thought process behind that.
So two things. One, when I bought System 6, we were primarily serving like $2 to $5 million revenue businesses, doing bookkeeping, processing payroll, paying their bills. That's still our core business today. But two things have happened. One, honestly, through the search ecosystem, we had clients start to outgrow us, or we had clients who were buying bigger businesses that we couldn't serve. So we launched kind of a mid-market, larger focused, including controllership services service line about a year ago. So that allows us to serve not just QuickBooks, NetSuite, bigger businesses, got a bigger offshore component there. That was seeing kind of what our customers were telling us. We were turning away business. So we launched a new service division. That was negative gross margin for the first couple months because we had to hire a team and, build revenue into it. It's still smaller than margin is lower than it should be because we're in build mode. So have to be willing to be able to cut profit to go after new service lines. And have to also like have the structure and not too much leverage to do that. And then we bought a tax business about 9 months, October, however many, 6, 7 months ago. Same thing, like we were losing customers to all-in-one bookkeeping and tax. We were losing sales prospects to all-in-one bookkeeping and tax. So, we responded to that by launching tax through an acquisition.
Well, that's another consideration, right? You're talking about growth through, marketing and throwing cash, different, organic, adding other services, in-house, kind of creating them yourself, but then going out and acquiring something like tax. I know you've done a few acquisitions here into the platform. What's kind of the thought process, or what should operators kind of be considering?
So we've kind of done both in the last year. Like we launched a new service line and we bought a new service line. I would say launching organic growth is always, the cheapest way to do it, but it takes longer. So like if we, had, especially like with tax, for example, average revenue per customer is smaller. So like building that to $1 million scale, which it is now, like would have taken a lot longer if we built it versus buying it. So I think there are pros and cons to acquisition versus building it. I think, acquisitions are more expensive, 100%, but you can get to scale faster. So I think that's kind of just like the biggest thing to think about is like, hey, how quickly am I trying to move? How much acquisitions are riskier? Like how much additional risk am I willing to take on more debt? We decided to acquire tax versus launch because I felt like it was going to take me much longer to get to some scale, to get to profitability if I launched tax because it's smaller ticket sizes, so to speak, versus launching this mid-market accounting, we could get to scale quicker. Look, I came from private equity. I was in love with deals. I still definitely have like deal fever, so to speak. But we've done 2 acquisitions. I'd say one's been really awesome. One's been like, a little mixed. And that's with buying stuff with the exact same tech stack, same like feelings of the business, but it's like professional services business, putting people together. It's hard. Like when you can't hire the people you're getting, like that's probably the biggest thing to really think about with acquisitions is you can't hire the people you're getting. Like there are probably people you're going to buy that you wouldn't hire. And like that creates challenges.
Yeah. So I want to be mindful of time here because I do want to have some time for the audience. So I'm going to get you 2 more questions I have, and I wanted them to be quick, okay? I mentioned in my intro, you sign off every email with keep building.
Yeah.
You're telling me backstage that, you know, some of your old PE buddies and whatnot give you shit about that.
Yeah.
Not corny or whatever. But what does it mean to you? And why do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like people internally, I've had butted heads internally as well on this a little bit, but just like, it's just, look, at the end of the day, this is your business. And a big piece of advice I got early on was like, one of the most important things you can do is like elevate the standard and kind of elevate the ambition of the business. And like, I talk all the time about we got to get 1% better every day. We have to have a growth mindset. That's one of our core values now. Like, I want, in every communication, people to understand that there's like an energy and emotion at System 6 that we are striving, we're pushing. And, so it is like little things of how can you, instill kind of cultural ambitions for your company. Like, I want us to be a group of people that are trying to build, trying to move, trying to grow. When we get punched in the face, like we had, kind of a tumultuous thing happen a couple weeks ago, and I've been like super impressed with how some people have responded. Like, okay, let's deal with it. Let's like, how can we make this better? And I think that comes from just like perpetually trying to lay the groundwork.
Yeah.
So that's where that comes from. Like, that's my personal energy. Like, how can I do better today? How can I do better today? And I do want to be kind of like in people's face about it a little bit, because that's a little bit how you like instill a culture.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's what
I like that.
from.
It's kind of like the little things that just anchor everybody.
Yeah,
and
I was
culture and whatnot. Yeah.
Freaking tired of signing emails off warmly or like best. I was just like, what does that mean?
Yeah. Best regards.
Yeah.
Really quick, if you could talk to 2021 version of Chris before he acquired System 6, or maybe when he was going through, diligence and whatnot.
Yeah.
What would you tell him?
I think I mentioned it about during search, but like a little bit of shiny objects. Don't chase shiny objects once you've bought the business. And I think like really, really understand what you're buying, and based on what you're buying, what does that mean the first couple of years are going to look like? And like, I bought a small business, and as a result, the first couple of years mean like you're going to be really in the weeds, and it's going to maybe not grow as quickly as other friends you see that are doing roll-ups. And, but the sort of path you've signed up for is to like go grow this thing organically, really aggressively for a couple of years, be in the business, hire better, like focus on that. I spent some time looking at acquisitions in the first couple of years that were like much bigger than us, that like were a waste of time. Like, I would love to have that month back to just be more focused on like, and sure, I learned some things, but I think like based on what you buy, you're kind of signing yourself up for a first couple year journey, and like really know that and own that and focus on that, and not kind of be too much, this conference I can go to, this acquisition, like, there's people out there who have pretty aggressive focus, and if you have that, I think you can really move the ball quicker. So yeah, that's one thing I would sort of do differently.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to turn it over to the audience for questions, but I really appreciate this conversation. I think it's been great. If we could just get a round of applause for Chris.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. I think this has been a great conversation. Anybody have questions? Kind of want to raise your hand here. Let's go right here.
Hey. Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. So the question was, hey, like, what are some of the things you've done to sort of improve your employees' lives or work experiences? So there are a couple things. I mean, one, like once we kind of got over a little bit of the nervousness of, hey, there's a new owner, like what's that going to mean? You know, are my jobs stable and all that? Like it became clear, and I think this is true in a lot of businesses, that like, you know, the previous owner had been like a little checked out, not growing it as ambitiously as he could have been. And like good people want to grow. Good people want opportunity. And so like the fact that we started growing and there was investment behind it, like definitely for some people removed some frustration where they had previously felt like, you know, how am I going to grow? Where's my job going to go? So that's one thing. You know, there's benefits to scale for people. Like we now have, I talked about it earlier, it's not as many like individual to client people. And so people feel like they can take vacation a little more securely and stuff like that. You know, we've added a few pieces of technology that have helped some stuff. But I think it's really like, I think that the biggest difference people would tell you is they feel like our culture has in some ways stayed the same, which is like, hey, we're trying to give you a good work experience, but we've added like, and we're also trying to give you the opportunity to grow. And people have really appreciated that.
That's great. Yeah. Let's go right here.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah, so I think the question was like, what's my equity stack look like? I ended up with a pretty traditional sort of like self-funded structure. So, you know, I have outside investors, a couple folks I knew through like the traditional search fund world who are also open to investing in self-funded search. Like, you know, more people are open. Like the reality is this is a good ecosystem to invest in. So you don't need to go to a search fund investor. You know, there's a lot of people that'll be interested in putting money behind this. The equity we raised was like an 8% preferred. So that's the interest rate they're getting on an annual basis. And they have like a 2 times step up. So, you know, we put in about 15% cash. So that means they own 30-ish% of the common equity. So, you know, and then, yeah, there's a 8% preferred return. So for me, like if I sell System 6 one day, I got to pay back the investor capital, you know, that the 8% that we have not been doing distributions because I'm putting in all these dollars that, you know, whatever is left for us after debt service is going onto the balance sheet for future acquisitions or for growth. So that 8% is like compounding against me right now. And then, you know, the equity split's kind of 70-30 once we get into common. Yeah, I put in about like 30 to 40% of the cash. Not required at all. Like you could put in a lot less. I like had some savings from before school, but not required.
We'll do a couple more because I know we're running a little bit over time here. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you can, like at the end of the day, every business reflects the owner. So, you know, you start with like, yeah, I mean, if you buy a business from like a bad owner, you're probably gonna have a lot of people that you might not want on your team. So just don't buy, like, you know, that's one thing. You know, other than that, yeah, like we now, I guess, know like what productivity metrics should look like with good team members. So we can kind of like do that during diligence. Okay, how many customers is this person working on? You know, but I think you can never, you know, do 100% of it. And I also think it may not even be that they're a bad person or a bad team member. It just may be that like this has happened once to us, like they're a good employee for that company they currently work at, but all the acquisitions, you know, all the 2 we've done since original, like we're not keeping the brand, we're bringing them into System 6. So there are like some things that we do differently that they may not be able to do or may not want to do. So some of it is not just like, hey, are they a good employee today? But like, hey, are they going to transfer over into your business? But I think there's always going to be some risk in that. And that's somewhat why like M&A, if you're growing organically, is like, not a slam dunk because some of the risks that you can't avoid.
Yeah. Let's do one more because I know we're pushing up on time. Final question. Anybody who wants it? Right here.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a great question.
Yeah. So the question was like, hey, if you're advising someone has an opportunity to buy a business in an industry where they have a bunch of experience and maybe it's not as good an industry versus like industry they don't have experience in, but better industry growth, margins, et cetera. Honestly, like unless that industry that's the growth, the margins is like super operationally intense and super operationally complicated, I would recommend you like go into that industry. Like I feel very, very strongly that, rising tide lifts all boats. Like the search fund model over the last 30 years, traditional and self-funded, has proven out that like if you're a, capable person, if you're an A player, like you can figure out like being in an industry you don't have a ton of experience in. Is it going to be harder? Yeah. But because it's a better industry, you have like more opportunity to make mistakes, which you will. But then once you get on the other side of that, like I would be in a better industry 10 out of 10 times. So yeah, that's how I'd approach that.
Well, thank you again, Chris, for doing this. I think this is a wonderful conversation.